So we finished the last time we learned together with the parable of the river and how it's used, how it's a very major parable. And we had a little bit of a chiddush about the 53 parshas of Chumash. That whatever you're learning at the time,
go through that again.
That the Zohar says that there's 53 parshas, but there are 54. There's all kinds of answers of what the missing one is. One explanation is, you can find all the answers, or many of the different answers in Moshe Vishnevsky's Chumash, Rebbe's Chumash. In the first volume he goes over it. But one of the answers that's possible is what we saw yesterday, that what you're learning right now is the 54. It means the first, it's the highest parsha, whatever you're learning at the time, and everything else is flowing out of it. And it depends on you to connect it.
Hence, live with the times.
Okay, for instance.
No, so because you're living with this
Right,
parsha.
right. ועל כן נאמר, בעבר הנהר ישבו אבותיכם מעולם למעלה מבחינת נהר. So I think we finished with the last time with
We talked about Avram.
and the other Avos.
He was called Ivri, came
Right.
from the other side, but nobody else was called.
Other side of the river. And so this is talking about the same river. So even though Abraham's history is a real history, it also has symbolic meaning. And the symbolic meaning was that he was associated with this initial higher supernal thought, and then he came down into the land of Canaan, means that he extended the river, he extended himself, he went across the river so that his thoughts could affect his actions.
Why do you call that symbolic? We say that what the Avos did was a siman for us.
Right.
So isn't it more than symbolic?
Siman is like a symbol. That's what it means.
But symbolic means that it's not real, it's just like...
Oh, no. That's it. That's
a
what I said.
A lesson for us how to live our lives.
It's more than just a lesson, because it's a whole symbolism. It's a whole way of interpreting the Torah, of understanding the Torah. So I said, beyond the fact that he has a history, that he did certain things, when we...
The history is incidental, no?
Not entirely. For instance, somebody could come and say... I'll show you why it's not incidental. Somebody could come and say, the Torah talks about this place called Canaan. I know where it is. It's here in this place called, right, Eretz Yisrael. But don't get too bogged up by the details. You don't have to understand everything literally. Really, it's wherever you are. Every land would be holy if you would just go there. So, that may be true.
Make you line here.
That you can turn every place into a symbol, into a type of Eretz Yisrael, but in the end, the Torah is literal. So in the end, there is special significance to this plot of land. And if you're going to be entirely symbolic, here's a beautiful thing that somebody wrote. Beautiful. It's the number one argument, but I don't know. The world is so upside down that nobody can even make it anymore. Why do the Reform Jews give us such a hard time about the kotel? That they have to have their services or whatever they do there.
They have such a burning love for Hashem.
So they have a burning love for Hashem, I don't doubt it. They have their own way of expressing it, I don't doubt it. Why do you have to do it at the kotel? Because what's your main argument? Your main argument is that it's all in the eye of the beholder. It's all subjective anyway. So for all you care, you could take a broken wall in Petach Tikva and make your kotel there. What in the world makes a difference where you're going to do this? Because in your conceptual scheme, there's no value to the history. There's no value to things being absolutely this way or that. Everything is relativistic for you.
You won't like this, but I think it's because this Damon Machiz.
That's clear, but they can't even follow through with the argument to understand how contradictory they're. See, they can't see that. You see it very clearly that they're just trying to push. They're trying to push against something because it bugs them. It bugs them that they don't have a say somewhere. But again, that place has no meaning for them really if you follow their conceptual scheme, because all of history is conceptual. It's all abstract anyway. If it wasn't abstract, why are you not dedicated to the same halacha that we are? We're dedicated to it because of its history.
The reformer doing is absurd ad absurdium.
It's not absurd. If you're consistent, it's not absurd.
There is a group of rabbis in inverted commas of the Reform movement who have now started giving lessons on Taras and Mishpacha to two ladies who live together as husband and wife.
Right. So here you say, I'm going to take the laws which we're talking about that it's forbidden for two women to be together, and I'm going to turn it into...
And it sends them to the mikveh.
It's a complete contradiction. But they can't see it. It's a farce, it's a contradiction, whatever you want. It's inconsistent. So stop bugging us. Leave us alone, because you have no... In your conceptual scheme, you can't make up, or if you do... If you're telling us you made up value for the kotel, then you made it up to bug us. It's the same way that you would make up now a feeling that you had to have somebody else's house because you feel that house really fits you and it reminds you of all kinds of things. Who cares? It's not yours. If you're coming and you're saying it's just as much as yours as it's mine because we share in the common history of this. Okay, so this is how things are done here. This is the history of this place. You don't come into a house of worship and decide that you do things differently because you feel like doing it differently. It has a history, it has a way of doing things, and you have to respect it. But again, they come under... So what I'm trying to do is not make the... They don't interest me that much, but what I'm trying to show is that if you take away from the Torah the literal side, then everything is subjective. There's nothing that's absolute. And Eretz Yisrael could be in Antarctica, for all you care. As they wanted it to be in Uganda. Okay. But so either it's true or it's not true. If it's true, meaning if these events actually happened, you have to follow through. If they happened but you don't care that they happened, then you also have to follow through. And you have to say that in the end, nothing matters. You can make up whatever you want. But because we don't say that, we say, yes, there's the symbolism that's learned from it, which is a higher level. It's an abstract higher level. It's very subjective. It's true. But there's also the literal level. And so one depends on the other in this case. Okay? So we never throw out the baby with the bathwater. But again, the idea here is that your forefathers, so again, when Yoshua was talking about it, when Joshua was saying this to the people before he died, he meant to say Terach, Nachor, the people before Avram. Nachor, not the brother, the grandfather. Not Avram's brother. His grandfather was named Nachor also. But here we're understanding it differently. We're saying that originally Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are your forefathers, and they were on the other side of the river. They were. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Historically, they weren't. But here we're understanding it symbolically. So it's not just Terach and Nachor and whoever came before Nachor and so on. It's the forefathers of the Jewish people. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. What do we mean to say? That the Midos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov represent Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes. Love, fear, and beauty. And compassion. They originally came from the higher aspect of the mind, which is called the other side of the river. That's their real origin. Their origin is not in the heart. And that's the Tanya on one foot. If I had to explain the whole Tanya on one foot, I'd say The summary of the Tanya is, don't settle for the emotions of the heart. Instead, you should encourage yourself to have emotions that originate in the mind. Right. Okay. ומחשבה זו יש בה גם כן שתי בחינות, כמאמר כתוב, כי לא מחשבותיי מחשבותיכם, לשון רבים. So again, what we started with was that there are two levels of thought, which are like engraved letters and like ink letters. כי מחשבת התא היא מחיית הדיבור, כי בלתי מחשבה אי אפשר לדבר, כמאמר הז"ל, השמע לאוזניך מה שאתה מוציא מפיך. So the first type of thinking is called the lower type of thought, and that is what fuels, the letters from there fuel the speech. And it's called that you can't speak without having some thought behind it. ועל בחינה זו אמרו רז"ל, בעשרה מאמרות נברא העולם. And that gave rise to the world. When we're talking about in God, this lower level of thought is the origin of the world and the angels and so on. Because we said that the world was created with 10 utterances. והמאמר אחד הוא בחינת מחשבה זו המלובשת ומחיית כל כללות הדיבור, כמאמר כתוב, ויוצר את ליבם מבינים כל מעשיהם אשר כולם נזכרים בסקירה אחת. And all that we talk about as everything in the world originating in the end from one utterance, there's 10 utterances, but the Mishnah says God could have created it with one utterance. Why did he create it with 10? So that one utterance that it's referring to, that is the germ, that is the source, is not the supernal thought yet. That is the lower thought. And then everything that comes out of it, and everything that extends from
the lower thought?
The lower thought, again, is what fuels the speech. And it's saying that it's separate from you. That those letters of thought, the thoughts involved at that level, are separate from the person. They're like a levush. There's something that, again, Torah shebichtav, that the Torah is enclosed within these letters. So these letters are lower. They're of a lower significance. But they're still before the utterance. The letters of thought that precede the utterance.
I don't understand. Why are they low?
Because they're called the extension.
Are they closer to Atzilus? Are they closer to before the Partsuf? Are they closer to before, the Tzimtzum? Because they haven't been spoken yet, so they're still in thought only. So this heightened speech.
Again, because they fuel speech, they're low. They don't remain thought. They're not like engraved letters that remain in the thought. Their task is to come out. So because they extend, because they come out, they're of a lower level. The engraved thoughts, they don't go anywhere. They always remain in your mind. They're always there. You don't take them out anywhere. It's like the tablets. You don't take the tablets out. You don't learn from the tablets. It always remains in the Holy of Holies. And from there, it affects everything. But it doesn't go anywhere. It's like part of the medium, part of the mind. And this one thought, that's what we call the lower thought. The one thought that could have been, or the one utterance that could have come from this one thought, that's what we call the lower thought. But above that, אבל בחינה שנית היא בחינת מחשבה עילה, הדבוקה בעצם השכל. The higher level is called the supernal thought, מחשבה עילה, and that's what we said is like the engraved letters. הם הנקראים חקוקים ואינם מהות בפני עצמם כנ"ל. They are never separate from the medium. They always remain in the source. They're never separated. So these are like letters of thought that are constantly etched in the mind. They're never even expressed. Or at least not directly. What?
Why shouldn't you express them?
Because expressing them is like taking them out somehow. You can't separate them. what you can do is you can shine through them. But you can't take the letters themselves and create speech out of it. Okay? It's like the same thing as, go back to the parable of the river. The wellspring is like the higher thought. The river as it extends, that's already the lower thought. So the wellspring you can't move. You can't decide, okay, move the wellspring 10 meters to the right. You can't do that. Because it comes out wherever it comes out. It's a fixture in the land that water emerges from this point. But the river you can move. It takes work, but you can move it. So you can change the course of its flow. And if you bring vessels and you build with whatever aqueducts or whatever you do, you can completely change the direction. You can make it go uphill even if you want, if you use pumps. So the river is completely separate from the wellspring in that sense. And the river can always be changed. That's why souls who have the higher level, right? They have the higher level of thought. That's why they're called agile. They move. They can walk. Because to walk means to increase your love and fear of God every day. Until you come to the wellspring itself. Meaning, as you're, it's almost like, this needs to be explained a little bit more, but I'll say it in short. The sages see the world this way, that there are naturally occurring feelings, but you can't make do, you can never be satisfied just with what naturally happens. So let's say a person feels tremendous love for his child. Somebody is overflowing with love. So again, this is annoying to a lot of people. They can't stand this, what I'm going to say now. But the sages say to you, look, if you feel this way, you have to start talking about it. If you feel like you love your child very much, you have to start talking about it. Why do you need to talk about it? Because you need to refine what you call love. You have to transform all the natural love that you have in the world to love for God. I mean, what are you doing? You're tracing back to the origin. You're saying, all the love that I encountered, that I experienced in my life, it comes out of love for God. One way I try to explain it is to say, what is God? God is the good. So when you love the good, that's the origin of all the types of love. So the fact that you love your child, you love it because it feels good. There's something good about it. But if you would go back to the origin, you would see that it's all about loving God or loving the good. All types of love, they're all an extension of it. What's another example? Another example is with food. If a person's a foodie, right, the guy who's really interested in food. So you can't go to a restaurant and just eat. No, it won't work. Because when you're a foodie, you have to discuss what you ate. Half the conversation in the restaurant is about how everything is prepared, where the ingredients are taken from, how expensive they are, how long it took to prepare, all these things. Because that's the experience of food, which is way beyond just tasting it. Why do you do that? Because okay, said it. But there are people that aren't. Same thing with wine. If you drink a bottle of wine,
yeah, I've seen them.
Yeah, you've seen it. So you can either just drink it and enjoy the wine, or you have to talk about it. You have to say, this bottle of wine, it's from here and it's from this year, and you know who the winer is, and it's really a blend. It's not what you think it is. All these things,
yeah.
and that changes the taste in your mouth completely. Why? Because now it has some value. The bottle cost, I don't know, $120. Wow, what about wine?
By the way, the taste of whiskey really does change according to whether you're drinking it by yourself or with friends.
See?
In a good mood or not, the taste actually literally does change. It's very interesting.
And by the way, chicken the same way.
Yeah?
Everything has a different taste when you're with friends or with two different things. That's why food tastes better in a restaurant. It's not because they know how to cook better. Because you're out.
Huh?
Because you've gone out with somebody.
Oh, yeah.
So, what are we saying? We're saying that you have to discuss, you have to get to the origin of something to really experience the power in it. So the same thing is true about love and fear. If all your love and fear is only external, it's just an experience of something external, then it's very shallow, and you're not getting out of it what you could. But if you take your love and fear and you think about it, how the origin of this love and this fear is really in my love and fear of God, it deepens the experience tremendously.
Does that mean you shouldn't have love for your children? No, you're not trying to say that.
In Iggeres HaKodesh Yud Aleph, that's exactly what he says. That you shouldn't have natural love. You should elevate the love. And again, a lot of people get enraged when they hear this. What? Why is nature not enough? Because if it's only nature, it's shallow. No, shallow is nature is everything for me. Okay, settle. I have nature and I have the supernatural also. And I know the man is not limited to nature. If he was, then we'd still be in lockdown because of Corona, because we would say, God forbid, we should mess with nature. So we're not going to make any vaccine, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. And the best course of action is to submit your the back of your neck and tell nature, here, beat me as much as you want. No, human beings fight against nature. It's our nature. Our nature is to say we're not going to be bullied around by nature. Nature is not the what's going to define our lives. We don't live in caves. We don't walk around. We drive cars and we live in houses. And we don't go to a wellspring to get our water or dig a well to get our water. We get it from the tap, from the water in the house. And we do all these things. Why? Because we're not so impressed with nature. So why are you not so impressed with nature in every instance of your life? But when it comes to love and fear, there you say, oh, if it's natural love, it's the best. No. It needs to be improved upon.
Do they know the same thing? They're two different things.
What and what?
Fighting against nature because it's harming you or not giving you what you want. And natural love that a person is supposed to feel for his children.
And it harms you. Causes harm.
Because?
Natural love causes a lot of harm.
Why?
Because it's uncontrollable.
Too much chesed?
For instance, you have to love the good, not the child. Because if you love the child, you'll never rebuke them. You'll never say anything. Never give them any kind of discipline. To give discipline, you have to love the good. It's not enough to love the child. You're right, you're saying, I love my child, that's why I want him to learn what the good is, the real good. But that means that you love the good separately from your child, and you're trying to get the child to understand the good as you do. And that's why you discipline them. If there was no ability to get beyond nature, then everybody would be a behemoth. Everybody would be a wild animal. That's what it means to walk. And be'harchava here, widely, is like saying that we're walking upstream from the wide place where the river is expanded a great deal, even to the tributaries where we just feel I love my children. We walk upstream to get back to the origin. And the origin, that's the love of God. That's the higher supernal thought. Ad bolim kol chutzava, until you reach the wellspring. Tchilat ha-machshava nikre ever nahar. This is the beginning of thought, which is called the other side of the river. Asher gam sham lo yishkot v'lo yanoch, ki olech v'or k'ma'amar katuv v'nahar yotzeh me'eden. And even there, when you reach the wellspring, there's deeper levels to get into. Right? There's more and more levels all the time. Okay. When do you walk upstream in this way, trying to reach back to the origin of your love? You do this during prayer. And before prayer. Prayer, of course, refers to the Amidah, to the 18 blessings. So before prayer, that's called Psukei de Zimra. That's when we say all these chapters from Tehillim. Uvrachot, we say the blessings, that were written by the sages of the Great Assembly. Al yedei avot haolam, kema amar Razal, tefilot avot tiknum, Avraham, Yitzhak, veYaakov, ve'midat gdula ugvura ve'rachamim. So again, the prayers and the blessings were written by the sages through the forefathers. Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and they're, what we said, Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes. כאשר כללו לנו חז"ל פסוקים מבארים גדולת הבורא יתברך ולגדולתו אין חקר, אשר אין לו תחילה ואין לו תכלה, אשר על ידי התבוננות זו יגדיל אהבתו להשם יתברך. And so what the sages had in mind when they told us to say these chapters of Tehillim before we pray was that these chapters reveal God's greatness. And that He has no beginning and He has no end. And that's the wellspring. So when you start to meditate upon that, when you start to think about that before you daven, that's how you come to love God. And same thing is true about verses that describe Gvura, that describe might. וכן פסוקים דברים גבורתו ויראתו היא מידת יצחק. So they correspond to Isaac. Because Isaac is Gvura. He is the... Okay. וכן יש פסוקים, והרים רחמנותו יתברך, אשר היא נקראת נחלת יעקב, נחלה בלי מצרים. And then there are verses in what we say before prayer that remind us of Jacob. Why? Because they discuss the state of being compassionate. Being without limits. It's called נחלה בלי מצרים, an inheritance without end. Why is compassion, mercy described as being limitless? Because it's the middle axis. And the middle axis is always the transfer of the infinite light into reality. So it's infinite. כי כולם אינם עצמיותו יתברך כי אם בחינת הערה, כמאמר כתוב, הודו על ארץ ושמיים, ארץ ובחינת ממלא, ושמיים ובחינת סובב, אינם אלא הערה דהערה, ובחינת שם, כמאמר, השתבח שמך לעד מלכנו, וכן שייך עליהם רחמנות, אשר רחוקים מהם מעצמותו יתברך. In any case, these verses, they reflect compassion. So we're going to have to end, because I'm not...
You're having some compassion on your body?
Yeah, I'm having some compassion. Strange thought, to have compassion on myself, but yeah.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah. Just the fact that we wanted to learn. I used to think it was the strangest thing. I used to be in classes with certain teachers that mid-sentence they would fall asleep.
Oh yeah?
You never think that happens?
Never seen
I get Moshe Weiner sleeps well at night. Anyway, it became it's like a funny thing. I mean,
Moshe Weiner gets very tired. He just says he can't live now.
Okay. So I remember the first time it happened. It's a little mevich. What do you say mevich?
Embarrassing.
It's not embarrassing. You sort of don't know what to do with yourself. Because the guy who's teaching just fell asleep mid-sentence. And he's sitting there, he's sleeping. I do this now every Shabbos. at the Shabbos table.
Are you talking? You fall
I
asleep?
talk and in mid sentence they tell me every time. I fall asleep.
There's nothing wrong in your own house.
It's kind of weird though. So it's very confusing for the people around the table. What do you do now? Do you shake him, try to get him?
Yeah,
Or
I
do you have some
remember
mercy on him?
I once remember going to a mashpia in the town when I was studying, went to talk to him, and he was giving me the answer, and he fell asleep and then started wandering off into his dreams, and I had no idea what to do with myself. Yeah.
The Talmud describes that as nim velo nim, tir velo tir. There's a description of it, and it says that that's where you get Ruach HaKodesh for most people.
Okay, so let's go. Let's see what's happening in Germane.
Okay, so we'll continue tomorrow.
That is what